But someone takes an overdose, a fatal dose of fentanyl. It's not then instantaneous death.
It depends partly. I mean, generally speaking, no. It's a function of the dose and the route of administration. So it's going to get into the system more quickly as an IV, or smoking will generally get it there pretty quickly as well. But ingestion would delay that somewhat. But however it gets into the body is going to determine how quickly that happens.
In this case, we have the two things, I think. One is there's some fentanyl in the stomach, the 20,000 nanograms.
Yes.
And also a measurement of, I know I'm saying it incorrectly, acetyl fentanyl.
Acetyl fentanyl, yes.
Does that is that information help you determine how it was ingested in this case?
It's suggestive that it's an oral ingestion. The presence of large amount of fentanyl in the stomach, sort of the rough equivalent of, several milligrams by volume is, suggests that it was taken by that route, but there's not any way to definitely know that. There is some literature that suggests that the stomach will concentrate it, regardless of where it's from, but it is suggestive of that. And the presence of acetyl fentanyl in the stomach is also consistent with, is more consistent with this being illicit fentanyl than otherwise. Acetyl fentanyl is a variant of fentanyl that is, in our office, certainly we've only seen it in the setting of illicitly manufactured fentanyl.
When a body comes in for autopsy, in this case, Mr. Richins' body comes in, is it routine to check for injection sites?
Yes.
And
in this case in particular, there was visible pulmonary edema described at the scene, foam coming out of the mouth, and that is most commonly in somebody who didn't drown or have a history of heart failure is concerning for an opiate overdose, and so we would, in that case, do a thorough check for those.
Oh, for
injection
sites, and none found.
Again, I did not do the exam. None are described, and none were discussed by Dr. Ulmer.
Okay.
And I didn't see any in the photographs.
When you, in cases where you've seen an overdose death, particularly an accidental overdose death where you suspected inhalation, what's the sort of evidence that you would expect to see?
I'm not sure what you mean, inhalation of the substance?
Of fentanyl or opiates.
Yeah, they all kind of look the same from that regard. You may see evidence that they've been smoking. Sometimes you'll see little burns on their fingers or other things from heating it up to smoke it, because they're not actually smoking it in the same way that you smoke a cigarette where you light it on fire and then you're inhaling the smoke. What actually is happening is that drug is being heated up and vaporized, and you're inhaling the vapors.
So in those cases, do you tend to see evidence of that heating up? That is, tinfoil or torches?
Certainly, yes, those things can be present at the scene.
Okay.
Commonly are seen at the scene.
Okay. Now, is it common for the people who are left behind to call the ME's office to find out what's happening in the case of their deceased person?
I wouldn't say it's common, but it's not uncommon. I mean, I spend a lot of time, most days I was in the office speaking with family members.
Typically that would be whoever did the autopsy would be talking to the person who's calling?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Ulmer retired in January of 2023?
Yeah, technically, her last day of work was the end of December of 22.
Okay. And did you receive a call from Kouri Richins then?
I did, subsequent to her retirement.
And did you return her call?
I believe I didn't return her call. I believe she was just put on hold and then connected with me.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to listen to a recording of that phone call?
Yes, I'm not sure where it came from either, but yeah.
Is it consistent with your recollection of that phone call?
I did not have any independent recollection of it until I heard it, but yes, it's me on the phone call.
Okay. And have you had a chance to look at the transcript of it?
I have.
Okay. And is that accurate to your,
Yes.
when you listen to the
Yes,
tape?
it appears to be.
Okay. State would offer States Exhibit 2-60 and 2-61T.
He indicated he's reviewed it. Certainly we can ask questions if he needs his recollection refreshed, then I think we could move to admit at that point. But if the state would just...
I think the state's admitting it as evidence of defendant's words and statements in the relevant time frame.
I misunderstood. No objection.
And so, okay.
We'd ask permission to publish it then if it's offered and admitted.
So 2-60 is the audio recording, correct?
Correct.
And 2-61T is the transcript.
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay. Those two are admitted. Scott, give me just a moment here, sir. Give that a try.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to listen to this. It's about 9 minutes long, and then I will ask you 3 questions regarding it. Okay, thank you. Can we advance it 30 seconds?
Right now, okay? Thank you
The
so
first
much.
30 seconds
Thank you
is...
so much. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to come to you right now, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay.
I'm not hearing it.
Did we lose it, Scott?
I think so.
All right, no problem. Let's start over. We're getting quicker at this. Scott, if you would disconnect and reconnect on your end, I'll do the same on mine.
I'm going to come to you right now, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Is that Chris?
Hey, this is Kouri Richins. Hey, I just have some quick questions for you. I'm just trying to understand the toxicology report, and I promise I won't take up a ton of your time.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Can you just kind of explain to me, I guess, she was saying that this kind of supplemental report, I guess, was left out of the first autopsy, and so nothing has really changed. Do you have it in front of
Right.
you?
I do. Yeah, I got
Okay.
the file here.
Scott, did we drop that again?
Yes.
All right, I apologize, folks. Let's try that again. Scott, if you would disconnect from the system, thank you. Then reconnect, please.
Seeing if we do any additional microscope.
I'm going to come to you right
So much.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Is that Chris?
Hey, this is Kouri Richins. Hey, I just have some quick questions for you. I'm just trying to understand the toxicology report, and I promise I won't take up a ton of your time.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Can you just kind of explain to me, I guess, she was saying that this kind of supplemental report, I guess, was left out of the first autopsy, and so nothing has really changed. Do you have it in front of
Right.
you?
I do. Yeah, I got
Okay.
the file here.
So can
So
you,
just so you know, so we issue supplemental reports, like if once the original report's issued, if we do any additional testing, if we do any additional microscopic examination, anything like that, then we include that. We issue a supplemental report to include that additional information. And sometimes it does change the cause or manner, but in this case it didn't.
okay, it was just like extra testing done?
Extra tox testing, yeah. So originally the testing, the only toxicology testing that was done was on blood. And so then this was additional testing on stomach contents.
Okay, and so is there a, difference in that, I guess?
Well, they just tell you different things in the sense of, it tells you something about what, was it, is it been there a long time? Is this something the person's been using for a long time?
Okay.
Is it something they ate? Is it something they, injected? Is it, whatever? And there's different things you can learn by looking at different substances. I mean, we fully expected to find it in the stomach. It's just a question of what was there.
So does this tell you, like, if it was like injected, if he ate it, is that what this, can you tell from this report?
Not definitively. I mean, it seems like, with what the amount that's there, that it probably was ingested, probably taken by mouth.
Okay, and so so the 15 ng, like, is that like a substantial amount? Is that like a trace?
That's a lot of fentanyl in the blood, yeah. I mean, that's, people die with half that amount or less in their system.
Okay, so that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's the next one down, the norfentanyl?
It's a metabolite of fentanyl. It's what your body changes fentanyl into after you take it.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. And then, sorry, just the third one, the acetyl, I don't know how you say that.
Acetylfentanyl.
Oh.
Yeah, that's just it's a form of, it's a variant of fentanyl that is usually only present in the setting of illicitly manufactured fentanyl.
Illicit manufactured, like a pharmacy?
No. Most fentanyl that we see that, ends up leading people to die these days is related to, fentanyl that's manufactured by drug cartels as opposed to by pharmaceutical companies.
Oh, good Lord. So this is like more of like a cartel. No, that's not what it is.
You call this street fentanyl as opposed to, hospital
Prescription.
fentanyl.
Okay, I see. And then is the ethanol, is that alcohol?
That's alcohol. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and is that like the 279? Is that kind of like a substantial amount, or is that like one?
Okay, Kouri Richins, in her own voice there, calling the ME, looking for answers, reading the supplemental autopsy report. Let's get a break. When we come back, we'll pick it up right where we left off. It's the state of Utah versus Kouri Richins. This is Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
You know the drill.
Be there when it pops.
Get to it.
We'll get this guy.
Like we always do. It's gonna be fun.
Then let's get it on. I love this team.
Find Ion on your channel guide or favorite streaming service.
Let's head back to Utah now, where testimony continues in the case against Kouri Richins. She's accused of lacing her husband's drink with fentanyl back in 2022 amid marriage and financial troubles. Following her husband's death, Richins wrote a book, a children's book, in order to help her 3 kids and others grieve the death of a father. Let's go back into the courtroom now, where we are hearing a telephone call. Kouri Richins calling the chief medical examiner, asking for some clarification about a supplemental autopsy report.
Is that
Well, you can't tell how much it is, and in this case, since this testing was sent, quite a long time after the original autopsy, most likely that's related to, post-mortem change, but it could be stuff that he drank. There's not really a way to sort that out. It could be related to decomposition of the stomach contents, or it could be related to stuff he drank. But either way, in the stomach contents, there's no way to know what that level means in terms of, if that was a blood level, that would be the same as a 0.28. Which would be, that person would be pretty substantially intoxicated. But because it's gastric contents, you could in theory pull something out and it would be, 100% ethanol, if, depending on if they just drank a stomach full of, if they just drank a bunch of Everclear or something else. So it doesn't really tell you much about how much they drank or what they drank or anything like that.
I gotcha.
When it's in the stomach. And it's not present in his blood, so.
I gotcha. Okay. So it's not present in the blood, just the gastric or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just the last one. What is quetiapine? Quetiapine?
Quetiapine is an antipsychotic medication. It's called Seroquel.
Okay. I gotcha.
It's a prescription mental health medication. It's prescribed for different things.
I gotcha. Okay. And it has like 16,000?
16,000 nanograms per milliliter. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And is that, quite a bit? Like,
that's a big number, but it doesn't really mean that much. So a nanogram is a millionth of a gram, and a gram is not very big. So even 16,000 of them is not a huge amount.
Okay. Is there could those have been mixed, or is that not kind of a?
What's that? Could what be mixed?
Quetiapine and the fentanyl, or is that a normal, drug thing? I don't know.
It's not. Most of the time, if we see those together, it's because somebody was taking quetiapine as a prescribed medication and they were abusing fentanyl. But do you have any indication he was abusing fentanyl?
No, that's why all of this is just what the heck is this and going on? So I guess that's why I'm confused just about all of this, honestly. So I don't know. So, I know it doesn't mean anything now, but just kind of something for me to, try and figure out, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming the acetopin, is that like a aspirin or something?
Acetaminophen, that's just Tylenol. Yeah.
Oh, that's fentanyl too?
No, that's Tylenol.
Oh, Tylenol. I was like, holy shit. And then the naloxone, I'm assuming, is just something that they gave him while he was here?
Probably would be my guess. It'd be, somebody that's unresponsive. It's a very common thing for EMS to give people.
Okay. No, that works. I was just trying to figure out, if this is anything different, if we found out anything new with this up.
Oh, come on.
Pause there. It's okay. We can fix it. Scott, don't change anything. Okay. It seems like if I do this.
All right, technical problem there in the courtroom. Let's bring in our guest for the hour in Martinez, California. Alan Kagawa is with us. Good to see you, Alan. This case, this phone call is interesting. I want your, anything stand out to you with Kouri, the grieving wife, calling in? Anything that maybe you think the jury is going to focus in on, looking for clarification on this supplemental autopsy report?
Thanks for having me. I'd say regarding this phone call, It's a little bit tricky. I'd say if you're a defense attorney, this phone call is not particularly great. Oftentimes what the jury wants to hear, especially when it comes to a defendant like this, is someone who's very passionate, very emotional. You know, maybe she's trying to find out more because she's grieving. Here, she seems rather just objective. She doesn't really have like a lot of emotion, and I don't believe it's playing that particularly well for the defense. The defense, of course, could later on claim, well, you know, this is how she grieves, but I'd say this particular phone call is not particularly helpful for them.
Yeah, there isn't the shock of like, well, fentanyl, where did he get it? And that whole thing. What about I don't know if you're up to speed, but last week, the drug dealer who, according to the housekeeper, provided the fentanyl to the housekeeper, to Kouri, to give to Eric, he gets up there and says, oh no, back then I didn't deal in fentanyl at all. It was scary, and I didn't have a hookup for it anyway. People were dying, so no, I gave her basically blues, 30 milligram Oxycontin, not fentanyl. How devastating is that for the state?
I'd say it's one of those things where, yeah, of course, this is hurtful for the state. The state would have absolutely wanted some admission that, the dealer provided fentanyl. Here, I'd say the prosecution did a fairly good job with its cross-examination and attacking the dealer's credibility. I'd say they still have a pretty valid case, but I'd say absolutely that's going to be one of the key things the defense is going to try to undermine, especially in their closing statement.
Yeah. If I'm a juror and this world is foreign to me. Let's face it, this is Utah. This is foreign to a lot of people, no matter where you live, but you can assume there are some conservative folks on that jury. Drugs, illicit drugs, fentanyl, drug dealers coming in. And do I care where, if I believe Kouri masterminded this, do I really care where she got it from? Or do I want to know, wait a minute, how did this housewife, mother of 3, get her hands on this stuff if indeed the drug dealer that says he didn't give it to her?
I think you're exactly right. It's going to be important to know exactly the kind of jury we're facing. This is a jury out of Utah. I think that, yes, there may be some hesitations and concerns given the sheer amount of negative stuff that's come out about Ms. Richins. But yes, I think ultimately here we're probably going to get a select number of jurors that will likely want to know, in that case, if it wasn't from this dealer, how did this fentanyl get acquired?
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. Alan, stand by. We'll get a break. More of the phone call between Kouri and the ME after they cue it up, right when we get back. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are in Utah. We've been watching the case against Kouri Richins. Prosecutors alleged that she killed her husband, Eric, for financial gain, and she was having an affair with the handyman. So she wanted a new life, and she needed his money to do it. He had life insurance. So what did she do? According to the state, she got some fentanyl through her housekeeper and a drug dealer to poison him in a Moscow Mule. The defense says no, that Eric had his own issues, drug issues, and he died from an accidental overdose, which was self-inflicted. Kouri didn't do this. Let's go back into the courtroom now. More from the chief medical examiner getting that phone call queued up.
I'd like to follow up on a couple things there. You mentioned to her about if the gastric contents were blood, it would be 0.28
Yes.
blood alcohol, but it's in fact not in the blood, it's in the gastric, and so there's no way of conveniently figuring out how much it is, much less its source.
That's correct.
Are you okay? Do you need a glass of water?
I've got water. I'm
Okay.
good.
You mentioned in that call, at first you said, we typically don't see it eaten, but you can't say that anymore. Could you expound upon that? How, in cases where there's pills, is it common to see them eaten?
Okay, a few things about that. So over time, over, I'd say, the last 20 years, we saw a rather dramatic change in the deaths we saw related to fentanyl. Until the early 20-teens, pretty much all fentanyl deaths were related to prescription fentanyl being used incorrectly, most commonly by healthcare providers and other people who would, have access to it and would abuse it. And it was just not a common thing. We just didn't see a lot of deaths related to that. Once patches became available, which were designed, primarily for, treating cancer patients with bad pain and things of that nature, people became creative with how they used those patches as well. Some people would, put on multiple patches, or they would put on patches and a heating pad to sort of drive it into their system more quickly. Seen people that would smoke them, people that would insert them into their rectum, people that would chew them up. Sometimes we find, multiple chewed up patches in the stomach, and certainly other ways have been described as well with patches. But once the illicit drug supply and primarily the heroin supply came to be, either augmented and or replaced by fentanyl, we saw, we saw much less in the way of the prescription abuse and much more of the illicit stuff being used. And some of that was in the form of what was heroin. Most heroin in this area was black tar heroin, which then became ended up having fentanyl within it. So people that had been heroin users would still be using what they thought was heroin, and it would have fentanyl in it, many times mixed with heroin. Eventually, some cases was not mixed at all, but was just straight fentanyl. Counterfeit fentanyl pills, or counterfeit oxycodone pills, fentanyl in pill form made to look like it was an oxycodone pill, also became a fairly common thing. And as we discussed before with other pills, people will abuse those in different ways. Sometimes they can ingest them directly, but they can also grind them up and inject them or smoke them. So they can be used in all kinds of different ways. But in the phone call, what I'm referring to, we mostly did not see anybody eating fentanyl before illicit fentanyl. With the advent of these counterfeit pills, we saw it somewhat, more often, or would assume that was the route. But we, even then, most of the time don't know how somebody gets the fentanyl into them, even if they have it on their person.
In this case, there certainly wasn't any injection sites noted.
No.
Are there tests, forensic tools, that could aid in the determination of whether one is a chronic or habitual or a naive user?
It's a good question. So there's been a lot published on the assessment of fentanyl levels in people that have died, and ways that you can try and parse some of those things out. The bottom line for all of them is you can't look at a number in isolation and make a determination based on, this is a lethal level, so this level has to be the cause of their death. There are certainly people who, become tolerant. Most opioids, people will develop tolerance over time, and so they can have very, very high levels and not have the same effect as someone who doesn't take it all the time. We had no history in this case in particular to suggest long-term chronic use, but also didn't know. And there are things that could potentially be looked at to try and assess longer-term use. The only published data I've seen around that revolves around comparing the fentanyl to the norfentanyl level, and levels where that ratio is more than 8 are believed to be consistent with an acute intoxication. Ratios of 2.5 or less are consistent with chronic use. In this case, that ratio is about 4.6, so it's right in between, so it doesn't really provide us helpful information either way.
Okay, that's the ratio between fentanyl and its metabolite.
Correct.
As you find it.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of pseudo-allergic reaction to opioids?
Yes.
Could you tell the jury a little bit about that?
Sure. Most allergic reactions are because the body has developed an immune response to some specific protein substance, whether it's nuts or grasses or whatever, pollens of different types, and your body reacts to that and triggers a reaction through your immune system that elicits what we typically think of as allergy symptoms that can range everywhere from, a stuffy head all the way up to anaphylaxis and death. In the setting of opiates do not elicit a true allergic response, but there are many people that take opiates who have an allergic-like reaction, but it's because the drugs themselves are directly triggering those cells that cause those symptoms as opposed to going through the immune system route. And so some people will, that chronically take opiates and opioids for pain, will pre-medicate or medicate around the same time with things like Benadryl and other things to minimize those symptoms because they know they have that reaction. Certainly most people that take them do not have that reaction, but some do. And that's
if one didn't know and one took some opiate, could they have hives and those sorts of allergic-like responses?
Yes.
Given all the symptoms that you talked about, the lungs, the edema, and the data from NMS labs, do you have any concern about the cause of death in this particular case?
No.
And the 15 nanograms, as you explained to Kouri Richins, was a lot.
Yes, it's well within the range of levels that we see in people that die from fentanyl.
Do you remember when that phone call took place?
Do I remember what?
When that phone call took place?
I don't off the top of my head.
Okay. Does your office take notes when you receive calls and reply to calls, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay.
That changed a little bit over the time I was there. It used to be we'd get a little scrap of paper with a note written on it, return this call. We turned that into a digital log before I retired, but yes.
Would it help to look at one of those notes to refresh your recollection as to when the call took place?
Sure.
May I approach the witness?
Of course.
No, I better show you. I'm sorry.
You're good. Thank you.
Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes, this is.
All right, we'll get a break and we'll come back to cross-examination of the medical examiner. What will the defense try to get out of him? We'll find out right after this.
This is the story of the Richins. Eric, a father of 3, met an untimely end, and Kouri, his widow, wrote a children's book on grief.
She's also charged now with his murder.
He was faced with betrayal and terror.
I know her innocence.
Is their story a tragic romance?
Or a twisted tale of grief?
The truth will come out.
The Grief Author Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Oh, how's that? Day 6, murder trial for Kouri Richins. Sorry, I had the mic off there. Prosecutors accuse her of scheming to kill her husband with a lethal dose of fentanyl. She denies it, saying he had his own issues with drugs and alcohol, and he must have just done this himself. Somehow gotten fentanyl, because that's how he died. Everybody agrees on that. And on the stand is the chief medical officer who's going through the autopsy. It's now time for cross-examination. Let's go back in.
Just said that an incoming call came to me from Kouri Richins, and she had questions, and that this is my notes.
And so What day did that phone call?
On January 12th of 2023, a couple weeks after Dr. Ulmer's retirement.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Could I get some more water?
Of course.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We've spoken before. I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions to Mr. Burmisters.
Sure.
I'll start off with that final thing that Mr. Burmister showed you. You indicated that you would take calls from different individuals, correct?
That's correct.
And did you receive other calls in this case from law enforcement?
I believe I did, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would it refresh your recollection, or do you recall a call around the same time in this case?
I don't recall the timing of it.
Okay. I'm going to approach you with the same case notes. And it's that first one.
Yes,
Okay. And did you in fact receive a call before Miss Richins?
Yes, the day before.
And was that law enforcement?
It was.
And was that also regarding the supplemental report?
Yes.
Okay. And either your recollection or what's in your notes, do you recall if most of the questions were the same that Miss Richins asked you on the 12th?
I don't have any specific recollection, but my general recollection was that we discussed the supplemental tox findings.
Perfect. I'll take that back. Now the questions that we just heard Miss Richins ask you, very similar to what we're asking today, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to talk to you about the allergen discussion you just had. You indicated that perhaps an individual could have a reaction like hives.
Yes.
If someone is allergic, in this case to an opioid, as you indicated, does that allergy disappear?
I'm not sure what you mean. Does it go away over time?
Over time, or within a certain amount of time, or?
I mean, allergies certainly are things that can fluctuate. People can receive treatment, and their responses to different things will go away.
Were there hives on Mr. Richins' body, to your recollection?
No.
Okay. We were talking about illicit fentanyl and counterfeit pills.
Yes.
Containing traces of fentanyl?
Milligram amounts.
Okay. Now, the tablets or pills that would contain these traces, what kind of pills would those be? Generally.
Objection. The discussion, if we're talking as Oxycontin, is that what you're saying?
I've not said it. I've just said pills.
Okay. Well, there's no pills that they have that you can make.
Would you provide a little more foundation for your question so we know what we're talking about?
Absolutely. Your testimony just now was that in your experience, you started to see that fentanyl overdoses were coming in through your office, correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And in those overdoses, you gathered information, and because you would see that there was a presence of acetyl, I say that right? Acetyl fentanyl?
Acetyl fentanyl.
Dang it.
Acetyl is also fine.
Okay. Acetyl fentanyl. that was more likely a result of illicit fentanyl, correct?
So it is a form of fentanyl that in some cases there were a variety over time of different fentanyl variants that were developed primarily in response to controlled substance legislation. If fentanyl is outlawed, then we'll add an acetyl group to that molecule, and then it's no longer controlled. And so we can distribute that as a non-controlled substance. And then that one gets controlled. And so then, I mean, there were dozens of variants of fentanyl that were developed over time. Acetyl fentanyl was one of the more common ones that we saw early in this wave of progressions, but was one that we saw not infrequently.
Now, with that, what was the acetyl fentanyl contained in, usually in your experience?
I don't recall ever having seen acetyl fentanyl as in a substance form in any of our specific cases.
Because it was always inside whatever pill or however it was administered, correct?
I don't even know if it was pill administered. I don't know.
Or injection?
Or I don't know how. We would see it in people, but I don't recall ever seeing that correlate with a specific pill that we had tested that was shown to contain that. I know generally the crime lab identified acetyl fentanyl in some pills, but I don't recall a specific instance in my casework where those two were correlated.
Describe counter.
All right, Alan Kagawa, your take on this cross. What do you think the defense really wants the jury to focus on?
Sure thing. I think you really touched upon, I think, three particular things so far. I'd say, first of all, was when exactly that call from Ms. Richins came through. Just established that this call was approximately a couple weeks afterwards, and that might explain why she was not horribly emotional at the time. I think the second thing is, the defense brought up that there was a talk with law enforcement about a very similar thing, showing that this was not an unusual conversation. And very briefly, the last thing is, I think he's trying to go into detail about acetyl fentanyl, specifically the illegally manufactured version. I'm not exactly sure what he's trying to get at here, but potentially, I think the idea is that this would not have come from Ms. Richins.
So here's a scenario that, because the drug dealer said, okay, yeah, I gave the housekeeper to give to Kouri these pills, the blues, the M30s, basically, but that's OxyContin. If the OxyContin was unknowingly laced with fentanyl, and Kouri wanted OxyContin, and has an explanation of why Eric liked it. Maybe he liked it with the Moscow Mule, had an oxy to relieve his pain, etc. That complicates everything, does it not? And she'd have to take the stand to do that, but if this was an accidental overdose, it's different.
You're absolutely right. If it's excellent point. If this is an accidental overdose because the OxyContin had some illegal fentanyl in it, then potentially the intent element that's required to establish murder may not be there because there was no realization that the oxy actually had all this fentanyl in it.
Yeah, because the housekeeper was a little bit, out. The drug dealer was focused. No, I didn't deal in fentanyl. I dealt with oxy back then. Interesting. It's a fascinating case. Alan, as always, thank you. Let's get a break. When we come back, more testimony in the case against Kouri Richins. Don't go anywhere. Be right back. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ted Rollins. We are in Utah this afternoon for the murder trial for Kouri Richins, the mom of 3 who wrote a book to help children overcome the untimely death of a father, is now on trial for that father's murder. Prosecutors say Richins killed her husband Eric by poisoning his drink with a lethal dose of fentanyl in order to collect on insurance money. But the defense says Eric had a history with drugs and overdosed by accident after he took a THC gummy or possibly an oxycodone laced with fentanyl. Let's go back into the courtroom now where we've been hearing from the chief medical examiner. Cross-examination continues.
Counterfeit pills are essentially illicitly manufactured pills, and sometimes very sophisticatedly, where people will buy the same kind of a pill press that a drug manufacturer uses, and they put their stuff into it and press pills that look very, very similar to legitimate prescription pills. The most common counterfeit pills that we've seen have been fake 30 milligram oxycodone pills that, when tested, contained only fentanyl. And there are also some benzodiazepine pills, things like Valium and Xanax and other things where those, what look like Xanax pills, have also contained fentanyl.
And you just indicated two different things, that in some instances it was purely fentanyl. Those pills contained only fentanyl, correct?
Correct.
And then there were other times where perhaps they were still traces, or there were still the other benzos, for example?
Those would be different pills. I don't know.
Sure.
I'm not aware of any where it was both fentanyl and benzos, are, you know, made to look like benzos that didn't have that. We've seen counterfeit benzodiazepine pills and counterfeit oxycodone pills, both of which contained only fentanyl.
Correct. Now, in this case, you were provided, or your office rather, was provided with a hydrocodone bottle, correct?
Correct.
Now, that bottle you keep in your office, correct?
We do, until the case is done. Eventually it's discarded, but yes.
You talked about would it be fair to say that fentanyl, right now you discussed how you would find acetyl fentanyl, and that was one part of it, and then you had to make sure that legislation got that specific one into the books so that it would then become a controlled substance, correct?
Yes.
And so I imagine that was really fastly evolving.
Yes. I mean, I was a member of the state's Controlled Substances Advisory Committee that would provide recommendations to the legislature to include in the Controlled Substances Act. And every year for, you know, this time from the late teens to the early 20s, it seemed like every year we were adding things. They did eventually make some changes where relatedness became, you know, if it wasn't changed enough, it was still covered. But it was an evolving process. And what we would see in the deaths that we saw related to fentanyl and fentanyl analogs also changed.
And with that, also peer review literature as to the effects of fentanyl, correct?
I would assume so.
That would make. You kind of hesitate. I would assume so.
Well, I mean, yeah, the peer-reviewed literature is evolving all the time, and so I don't know if there's a specific thing you're referencing. I don't know, but certainly, initially there was not a lot of. As the fentanyl supply changed from primarily pharmaceutical to primarily illicit, there in the early stages of that, there was not a lot of new literature to look at the postmortem levels in people that have died of this illicitly manufactured fentanyl as compared to the different ways that people used to take it as a diverted pharmaceutical before.
And that's exactly where I was going, the postmortem. These levels that we've been discussing, Mr. Burmester asked you about the postmortem levels, and you received from NMS reference comments, correct?
Yeah, that's part of their report.
Correct. And do you recall what those numbers were in terms of the femoral blood as it relates to accidental drug overdoses?
I don't recall specifically what the numbers were, but generally speaking, the levels that we see in accidental overdose deaths from fentanyl, overlap the levels that are seen as described with, prescription usage.
And part of the reason for that is, going back to the literature, is that there is no, I'm trying to find the right words for it. There's no set number, universal number that the medical community can attribute in terms of what becomes lethal, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and the reason for that, or part of the reason, and add to this, is both the individual's own use, prior use, if any.
Yes.
perhaps the toxicity or rather the amount of fentanyl in it, correct?
The dose.
In the dose?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The potency of that dose, correct?
I mean, fentanyl is going to be relatively equipotent, but the fentanyl analogs may have different potencies.
Okay. A fixed fatal threshold? Does that sound?
Yeah, there isn't one.
Okay. You were discussing the ratio of fentanyl with norfentanyl with Mr. Burmester. Do you recall that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I got lost, to be frank.
Not surprising. And not always good as explaining as I'd like to be.
No, I think it was just going over my head. But tying it together with the post-mortem literature out there and this ever-evolving world that unfortunately we're dealing with now with fentanyl, is there any literature on how that ratio can be affected that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of any specific literature that looks at the ratio of fentanyl to norfentanyl in determining, is it a cause of death? Is it, a recent, a one-time use or multiple-time use? I'm not aware of any literature that discusses that. There certainly has been some literature added over the years to discuss comparing, for example, the amount of fentanyl seen in the heart to that seen in a peripheral site. We call it like something like from the femoral vein. To try and assess, things, or looking at other, what we would call substrates, other sample types, fluid from the eye, testing the liver, urine, other things of that nature.
Let's talk about that. We discussed this when we spoke. You talked about things that you, looking back, you could have done.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Could you explain to the jury some of those?
Sure. There is, I guess they say hindsight is always 20/20, but you can certainly, there are a number of things that are in the literature now suggesting that you might gain additional information if you test, for example, urine, which is not something that medical examiner's office routinely does in any case, because what's in the urine is simply a reflection of what has gone on before, and what we need to know is what's in the blood, what's in their system circulating at the time they die. So we don't routinely test that. There is some suggestion that that can help you sort out how quickly or not quickly a given death related to fentanyl might have occurred. And then there's been other evaluation of other substances like fluid from the eye, what we call vitreous fluid, as well as liver, and looking at both of those as a means of perhaps augmenting the understanding of what's going on in the blood as well. When you take something, for example, by mouth, it goes through, down into your stomach, gets absorbed, and then anything that gets absorbed goes through your liver before it goes anywhere else. And so an oral ingestion, in theory, might show up as a higher level in the liver than if it's taken IV or something in some other method. So there are other things we could do that would certainly, potentially help our understanding of how the fentanyl played out in Mr. Richins' case.
And you had also mentioned in our discussion, the brain, the heart, and maybe you mentioned blood. Are those also helpful? Looking back again, hindsight.
Yeah, so the brain, there's good literature that suggests the brain takes up fentanyl, and that is the cause of both the central nervous system and the respiratory depression. It's interacting with opioid receptors in the brain. There's not any published literature that I'm aware of that talks about what a given level in the brain would mean. Same with other solid organs. There's starting to be some literature discussing what a liver level might mean, but I'm not aware of any other specific organ sampling sites that might add light to that.
What about hair follicles?
Hair testing in the setting of drug use is primarily used as a means of evaluating drug use over time. Drugs do get taken up into the hair. And when we collect samples to send for hair testing, which pretty much we only do when we're requested to, but we will, you tie off a bundle of hair. They want usually about a centimeter, so a little under half an inch bundle of hair. And we tie it off at the roots, cut it off, and then that gets sent to the lab, and they take sections of it starting at the root going back to see, based on how fast hair grows, how long has this person been exposed to this substance.
And you indicated unless you're requested, I imagine, for example, law enforcement.
Yes.
Okay. That wasn't done in this case.
That was not done in this case.
Now, as we heard, Ms. Richins, she indicated that that Eric was not using fentanyl, correct?
Correct.
And there was, going back to the initial conversation or the initial testimony regarding the different categories, when you're trying to really determine what to put down on the death certificate, one of the unanswered question was, well, was he using, correct?
Yeah, that was part of it, certainly.
And in our prior discussions, you've indicated that, at times individuals didn't tell family, correct?
That would be not uncommon, yes.
Okay. And certainly in this case, a hair follicle test, if it had been requested of your office, you would have sent it out.
We would. I don't know, and I think as I told you, I don't know what the literature says about hair follicle testing for fentanyl specifically, whether that's a useful endeavor or not. I don't know.
Fair enough. Certainly it wasn't asked of you, and certainly you didn't get the results back.
No.
Now, had that been done, had you gotten the results back and it did show long-term, that certainly would have played into your determination as to the manner of death, correct?
Objection calls for speculation. The testimony has been...
Yeah, why don't we have Mr.
Sidebar, we'll use that as an opportunity to slip in a commercial break and get you back into the Utah courtroom for more testimony in the case against Kouri Richins. Stay with us.
This is the story of the Richins. Eric, a father of 3, met an untimely end, and Kouri, his widow, wrote a children's book on grief.
She's also charged now with his murder.
He was faced with betrayal and terror.
I know her innocence.
Is their story a tragic romance?
Or a twisted tale of grief?
The truth will come out.
The Grief Author Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Let's head back to Utah now for more of the murder trial for Kouri Richins, the children's grief author accused of killing her husband Eric with fentanyl. Back in 2022, prosecutors say she had a bunch of problems. Financially, she was flipping homes but losing money. And he had life insurance, which could get her out of her financial issues. She had a boyfriend, the marriage was crumbling. The defense says, no, they were doing just fine, and Eric had a drug problem, and he died from an accidental overdose. Let's go back into the courtroom now. The chief medical examiner on the stand. Pick it up.
You are not aware of a hair follicle test, in your experience, being done for fentanyl?
I am not.
Okay, you don't know if it can be done?
I do not know.
Had a hair follicle test just for any drug, including fentanyl, just hair follicle test to be sent out to see if there's any type of drug use whatsoever, your office would have done that, correct?
Objection?
Overruled.
If we were requested to, that's certainly not something we would ever routinely do.
Absolutely no, and I'm not implying that. And to be fair, the reason you wouldn't do that is because your office is tasked with what's at hand, which is what do you have in front of you to determine the manner and cause of death, correct?
Correct. Why is this person dead right now?
Correct.
As opposed to some other time?
And in terms of your checklist, the hair follicle just doesn't come in terms of what you do, correct?
I mean, it can, or it could in theory, but yeah, mostly no.
But if it were to be requested of you, you would or could do it.
We could.
Objection. I think the answer was for this particular job.
What's the objection, Mr. Burmester? Asked and answered.
Asked and answered, and calls for speculation.
Sustained. I'll ask you a different question.
So I'm going to go back with all that in mind. If you send out a hair follicle test, is your practice generally, when you receive the results of said hair follicle test, to use those said results in your determination of whether or not to change a manner of death?
They would be part of, all the information that we look at to come up with our final cause and manner of death.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you for that. There. Mr. Burmester asked you about the sequence of items that were ingested or not ingested. Do you recall that?
Yes.
You indicated that there's simply not enough information at hand to be able to determine that, correct?
Yeah, not just from this case. In forensic toxicology, generally, you can't tell when something was taken just based on a number.
And that's what I wanted to make clear, whether it was just in this case or just generally.
Generally, you can do that.
And that means that there are no tests or nothing else that you can go back and do to make that determination, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Bear with me, I'm almost done. Okay. Now, in your involvement in this case, something unusual did occur in this case in terms of the investigation, correct? In terms
you'd have to be more specific.
I'm sorry, yes, I will.
Yeah,
In terms of
talking about?
I'm going to rephrase.
We're about to find out.
Yeah, I apologize for poor question. I'll start all over. We saw your case notes.
Yes.
And there you spoke with one law enforcement officer, correct?
Yes.
Now, you also received other communications from other law enforcement officers, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And do you recall being invited to a meeting to have a discussion about this case?
Yes.
And do you recall if the DA was involved in that case?
I believe so.
And other prosecutors, correct?
I believe so, yes.
As well as other law enforcement agencies, correct?
I don't know.
Okay. And that was unusual in your practice?
It's not common. It happens, but not commonly.
Okay. No further questions, Judge. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Mr. Burmester, within the scope of cross, please. Oh, my apologies. Maybe not yet.
Apologies,
Do you have some order, sir?
Yes, I do.
Okay, very good.
We're good, Judge. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Mr. Burns.
Just trying to figure out this meeting you said. Is it the one you testified earlier when you got a call from law enforcement?
I believe so. From my notes that were in the log that I looked at, I was invited to a meeting. It was my recollection, it was some sort of virtual meeting. I don't know if it was WebEx or Zoom or whatever. And I believe it was with Mr. Hemingway's computer, but there were other people in the room who were introduced to me, but I don't recall exactly who was there.
You don't know who that was?
I don't know who. I couldn't give you.
And when defense counsel says the DA, presumably the Salt Lake DA was not interested in this case.
No, I think he said DEA.
DEA.
Oh, yeah, I don't recall. I misunderstood that. I thought I was asked DA as well.
So my apologies. I want to make sure I don't get involved in any confusion here. Would you please clarify what this testimony is?
I think you've said you received notice to attend a virtual meeting and law enforcement was there.
Yes.
And you don't know who specifically in law enforcement was there?
Besides Mr. Hemingway, no.
And this was the day before Kouri Richins called?
That's what the log says. Yeah, I don't have any recollection of that specifically.
Hydrocodone doesn't look like this M30 you talked about, imprint of M30.
No, I've not seen any counterfeit pills made to look like hydrocodone pills.
Okay. In this case, there were no traces. That is, you testified there was a lot of fentanyl in the blood.
Yes.
And there was no traces of anything else related to fentanyl.
In the blood, yes, correct.
These other things you talked about, urine, vitreous, liver, brain, heart, blood, none of those, based on your understanding of the literature, et cetera, would give you a definitive forensic proof of long-term use or not long-term use?
Definitively, no.
Okay. I have no more questions.
Mr. Ramos, anything further for Dr. Christensen?
Yes, Judge. 1 second.